Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the class. This is part of a series I'm giving, sort of named the a la carte course series, because you can take all of them or you can take just one or, a few. And this is the second one. The first one was meditation. This one is on the turning point in the healing crisis and understanding the dynamics of the law of cure, understanding the phenomenon of why, when patients have been doing so well and professing to be changing and doing so well for so long, all of a sudden they might come in and doubt that anything's happened at all. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. A person will tell you 51 treatments in a row that their life is changing, and the 52nd treatment, they come in, they say, I'm stopping everything. This has done nothing for me. And you start reading back to them. But, the last time you said this and the time before you said this, and they go, oh, I don't know anything about that. It's like, I call it star witness goes mum. It's sort of like all of a sudden there's a gag order and nothing ever happened in the last 52 weeks of telling you that their life was changing and everything was fantastic has totally changed. It's also the phenomenon of, related to the phenomenon of why, when people start to vastly improve and really turn their lives around, and you can see this with musicians and famous actors and actresses all the time, is that just as it seems somebody gets sober and gets straight, they die, right? Um, Danny Gadden, the guitarist, Roy Buchanan, the guitarist, Jimi Hendrix, so many people had just gotten sober and everything was looking good, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Well, why is that? It is also related to the cycle of grieving, and we're going to talk about all of this in terms of Chinese physiology and the functional dynamics in the I Ching between hexagram 22 and 23. We're going to talk about it in relationship to the pulses and what's called the husband-wife imbalance. And then we're going to review the law of cure and how to tell whether something is actually a law of cure reaction or if a person's just getting worse. And we're going to look at how to bring a person through this and try to intricately look at the phenomenon and understand it. And it's an archetypical phenomenon. It's a very deep groove. It's a very deep cosmic groove. It's an archetypical groove that is addressed in great detail in the Taoist and the Buddhist writings and the cultivational texts. It's addressed very deeply in the I Ching. And what it comes down to is the conflict between the life impulse and repression, the conflict between yin as mundane conditioning and yang as eros, creativity and love, the conflict between the unconscious and consciousness, the conflict between the life force and the death impulse. It's just the basic fundamental friction between the fundamental friction that arises from having incarnated from unity into a dualistic world with opposing forces, opposing motivations, into a vehicle, a human vehicle, and the vehicle is the body, the vehicle is the mind, the vehicle is the soul. These are the dynamics because it is a cosmic groove in the universe that arise from being a singular consciousness, meaning that there's only one, that has incarnated into a vehicle that is divided. The body is divided, The mind is divided. Our motive is divided between selfish and selfless motives, between selfish inclinations and bodhisattvic inclinations. So we're going to look at this is a very deep and very well-known archetypical pattern, which is discussed in all traditions. And we're going to discuss it in the context of the Chinese tradition relative to Chinese medicine, but certainly it is archetypical, part of the collective unconscious, and a deep groove in the minds and souls of all human beings and in all cultures. And it is expressed with different content in all cultures, but the theme is always the same, which is that as human beings, we have a choice and we have a divided nature. And we get to understand and see that division and then choose sides, pick a side. And so John Coltrane, for instance, said, there are many forces of evil in this world. I want to be the force for the good. And when asked if he had three wishes, what would they be? Duke Ellington said, I wish only for the best. I wish only for the best. So we're really looking here deeply at what it means to be a divided human being. And we're going to look at first, Emily is just bringing me some warm water. I should say hot water, very hot water. We're going to look at the basis of division, and we're going to understand the cosmological basis of division. In the Chinese tradition, we are one with the cosmos, and all the functional processes that we see out there are also in here. And there's no separation between them. There's no separation between them. There's the illusion of separation, but there is no separation. So I want to explicate this in terms of, you might as well shoot at the center of the bullseye. So we'll talk about it in terms of cosmic evolution and cosmogenesis to understand that fundamental pattern. And then we'll bring that pattern into what it means to be a human being and how we experience that and the forces at work within us that manifest as the healing crisis and the turning point. So fundamentally on the left here, we have unity. And we human beings can only discuss unity as two. We can say unity and we can say one and we can say the absolute. We have words for all that. But we're always talking about an it, which is that, and that means there are two. There's us and there's it. There's an observer and an observed. So prior to creation, so Lao Tzu says the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. But if forced to give it a name, I call it Tao and the Tao is one. But now there's two. There's that which can't be named, and then there's the Tao. So when we can experience the absolute, absolutely, can close our eyes. There are two ways to experience the absolute. You can close your eyes and renounce all relationship to experience, as in Zen meditation, and in not moving and in letting go absolutely and unconditionally of all content and having no relationship to anything that arises, one can experience the absolute. The other way to experience the absolute is in relationship with one or more individuals, intersubjectively. If you play sports or you play music or you act or you dance, you know there are moments where you're working with other people where all theory drops away and there's a timeless moment where something is born and something is created that was greater than any premeditation ever could have planned for. And you know it and they know it, and you don't even want to talk about it because to start to even speak about it or point to it would make it an it and would take you away from the spontaneity. But you experience being in the zone with another individual. So the sort of pinnacle of that in materialistic culture would be like simultaneous orgasm with a partner, looking into each other's eyes. But that's at that's sort of like a second chakra level experience. But that experience of merging and no separation and of total union of two individuals not only doesn't need sex to for that to happen, often sex we can say it's a slippery slope to all sorts of complexity. And I've never noticed that having sex with someone ever made a relationship more simple. I mean, that's just my experience, maybe. So the point is, we can have that experience we can experience non duality through renunciation of everything. But we can also, and closing our eyes and withdrawing, going into the cave, but we can also experience non duality where two or more hearts are recognize themselves as one. But as soon as we talk about it, there are two, because we're talking there's a we and there's an I and there's an it. There's a we and there's an it, and that's two. And where there's two, the Vedas tell us where there is two, there is fear. But if there's only one, there's nothing to be if there's no fear. There's no anxiety. If there's only one, then everything is as it is. So when we talk about the absolute, we talk about emptiness, which is this infinite darkness on the left, and luminosity. And it is quite possible for one to meditate or contemplate, or these days you can just swallow something and in 15 minutes experience that all we are, all I am, all we are is a fire burning in emptiness, and there is nothing else. And that is emptiness and luminosity. The Taoist alchemical texts talk about it as all of a sudden there's brightness in an empty room. There's infinite dark and infinite light. So there's a dual nature to it. When we step into the world of becoming, so that is being on the left, meditation, there's infinite emptiness, but you're still sitting straight, not moving, and using intention to hold the back straight, not move, and using intention to just let go, let go, let go, let go. There's consciousness, there's brightness, profound brightness, profound darkness, all is one. That's being, but as we move into the world and we incarnate and begin to become, the 10,000 things are illuminated in the bright light of day, and each have their own name and appear to have separate and individual identities and destinies. But at the heart of everything, at the heart of everyone, there is a portal to an infinite mystery. For those who've read my green book, my last book, Deepening Perspectives on Chinese Medicine, if you got as far as the later chapters, you would be familiar with this content. But what I've done is I've looked at the evolution of consciousness through all stages identified in history and looked at the universal archetypes in culture and how the different cultures talked about them symbolically and related that all to Chinese physiology, integral physiology, which sees Chinese medicine as an art and science of human development. Not just moving chi, but liberating consciousness as light and care and love through the divided vehicle of the divided human being. So the earliest state of development would be like the Japanese enso. It's just a circle, undivided. But then there comes a division. And different traditions put that divisions at different times. You could say that division occurs with conception. You could say it occurs is reinforced with first breath. And then but for the first 3 months of life, the first 3 months of life are the fourth trimester. On the child's third birthday, they're 1 year old. There's been 9 months in the womb, 3 months outside of the womb. 9 plus 3 is 12. In China, that's the child's first birthday. And on the first birthday, 3 months of life, the fontanelles begin to close. They begin to harden. For the first 3 months of life, the child's eyes don't focus, their ears don't focus, and their motivation is purely reflexive. You clap and they shudder. They're just governed by reflexes. They can't will or initiate a movement. They are just one. There is no difference in the newborn infant between its lips and the mother's nipple. And when it sucks on that nipple, the oxytocin starts flowing, and mother and infant just regress back into unity together, into a profound unity. At 3 months, where the fontanelles begin to close, the child is internalizing their life mandate, which is their Ming, their destiny. My first book, Nourishing Destiny, was about that whole process. And these are figures of the divided state. So the upper left is from a Greek carving. And then the yin yang symbol, of course, implicates that divided state. And the Ren and the Du make the infinity sign around the human body. And figure D here is from the Taoist canon, showing the first line of division in the individual. And that division is embodied at first with the emergence of Daimai embryologically. And then with the gaining of taking the first breath, there is now an influx between the early heaven influences of Jingqi and Shen and all the conditioning influences of life experience and culture. And then in the third month of life, the completion of the first year and the closing of the fontanelles. So the snake swallowing its own tail is a metaphor for a completely self-enclosed form of consciousness, a narcissistic form of consciousness, which is totally oral and self-involved, right? Where the baby is just programmed reflexively to suck and regresses back into unity. So that is embodied in the conception and governor vessel in the infinity sign. where the chi goes from CV1 to CV24, down to GV1 up to GV28, and around the body in this infinity sign, which is an functional energetic representation of duality. So here we have the ground of being, we have emptiness. And out of that, there is an explosion. And that explosion, that's the straight line to heaven. So we have the circle and the straight line. We put the two together and we get a spiral, the spiral of development, imaged and embodied in DNA, and represented as the different stages of development human beings go through in a given incarnation and through many incarnations. And the straight line is the number one. And that's the first word in every Chinese dictionary, one. And in the I Ching, it's heaven. And it stands for non-duality. The entire language is based on the recognition of oneness. Every other character, every distinction that can be made goes back to the fundamental recognition of no separation. So we can see that in Zhang Qi, the straight line, the authentic self. We can see heaven and earth. And the character Zheng is in Zheng Qi, means to go all the way from earth to heaven, to reach the distant shore without stopping halfway. Means to be upright. It's the quality of the gallbladder official. Stand tall like a straight tree and go all the way to heaven without stopping. And it's in the character Zheng as Zhen as in authentic is in De as in Tao Te Ching, which means original nature and virtue. So here we have the spinal cord of the meditator, sitting straight, not moving, and renouncing all content until all that's left is emptiness and luminosity. And then we recognize that who and what we are is a fire burning in emptiness. And from this experience, that the nature of that fire is choice, is free will. So we emerge from emptiness and the fontanelles begin to close and we begin to develop. And at some moment in life, there's a trauma. And at that moment, we do something we've never done before. We draw a conclusion about the meaning of it. What does it mean about me? What does it mean about other? What does it mean about existence? And ultimately, what does it mean about the nature of the force behind existence? Is it good or is it bad? Is it kind? Is it aggressive? Am I safe? And in the moment we draw this conclusion, we're drawing that conclusion generally either unconsciously as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old. But as we gain language, we start to be able to speak to ourselves and we draw that conclusion eventually cognitively, intellectually. We may forget that we've done it, but we draw a conclusion about who we are and how life is, who we are, who the other is, the nature of life. For the water type, will I be supported? For the wood type, is life fair? For the fire type, is connection and love safe? For the earth type, am I enough? For the metal type, am I of value? And we draw that constitutionally conditioned conclusion, which acts as a filter the rest of our life to screen all evidence from consciousness that is coming to us internally as thought, feeling, emotion, sensation, memory, every moment, and coming to us externally as life circumstance, illustrating to us the partial nature of the conclusion we drew. And it is a sad fact that for most people on earth, they die at 80, 90, 100, 110 years old. And the outcome of their life was determined by the true but extraordinarily partial and incomplete conclusion that they made in the face of a trauma as a survival mechanism when they were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And thus the ego is born. And the ego is the biographical self. It is born in a moment of trauma, a moment of ultimate separation, tragic in the face of what's perceived as a tragedy. And the person experiences a loss of innocence and a huge contraction. And this person out here on the ego spectrum goes to most therapists, and the therapist says, "Tell me what happened." And the person goes back to here and starts working their way back through all of this. And I have just always found it more effective to bring a person out of shock. And the whole first chapter of my clinical practice book is on the physiology of shock, what shock means in Chinese medicine, and how to work with it. There's no greater shock than forgetting who you are and why you're here and being tossed out into a world where you perceive yourself as a victim of circumstances. And I always have found it far more efficacious to just introduce a person to emptiness and luminosity directly so they can experience that dimension of themselves where nothing ever happened, that has nothing to overcome, that wasn't wounded, that wasn't traumatized, where nothing happened and nothing is happening and nothing is ever going to happen. And once they discover that, to help them then look at all the content out here from the position of the already free and liberated dimension of the self. So rather than working through the cesspool from within the cesspool, it's my preference to get them out, give them a shower, give them some soap, a fresh change of clothing, and say, "See that hole? Don't ever jump in there." And they go, "But there's all this stuff in there." And I go, "Okay, well, we can look at it from out here. We can talk about it from out here. But you don't want to do it from in there because it stinks." It isn't pleasant. It's experienced, it's experienced as a profound contraction, and it's experienced as a sense of a person who's trapped in this, their overall sense of life is one of inherent limitation, cynicism, doubt, victimization, suffocation, limited possibility. In other words, hell. What we're talking about when we talk about the turning point and we talk about the law of cure is we're talking about the dynamic relationship between the archetypical perfect circle, which images the feminine, the unconscious, being, the ceaseless creativity of gestation, the infinite creativity of gestation, and the explosion of love and light and yang coming out of it, which is the choice to become, and then a ceaseless and endless fascination in the world that is becoming. An uncynical, inherently unlimited, ceaselessly and endlessly positive attraction to the potential to flower into the world as the true, the good, and the beautiful. And we're looking at that ground of being and the explosion coming from it dynamically in relationship to the force of seeing, of repressing that and seeing oneself as separate from it and a victim of circumstance, as opposed to the endless driver of all creativity. So they're really quite diametrically opposed views. So when we can talk about this division, now understand we're taking a hop, skip, and a jump through this. In a couple hour evening class, I'm giving a class now called Dimensions of the Self, which is a 12 session course on each part of the self, the unconscious, the subconscious, the ego, the superego, emptiness, luminosity, the authentic self, the psyche, the soul, this sort of thing, the mind. We're just sort of stepping through this now to create a broad basis for this particular discussion. So we can understand these two momentums, that emptiness and luminosity are the dimension of the self that is free. There are two kinds of freedom a human can experience. The East has historically, and the Eastern traditions have historically been about from, freedom from. Close your eyes, relax, and let your mind float downstream. Freedom from. Go into a cave, leave culture, meditate, drop relationship to the entire phenomenal world. Let go of all thought, feeling, sensation, emotion. Let go of any preference for anything to be other than what it is, and become free from what? From ever having to come back again. That's the Eastern traditions, freedom from. The Western traditions have been about freedom to. Freedom to has flourished since the Enlightenment. And its greatest expression is in the striving toward democratic principles. The idea that every human being has the innate right to live a life of dignity free from fear, free from persecution, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, class, gender, etc. So there's freedom from and there's freedom to. The ego is the dimension of the self that sees itself as separate, special, superior to everything and everyone else. The ego is conditioned by experience, So a mechanism of separation is to see itself as I am a. I am a man, I am a woman, I am a Jewish man, I am a Jewish woman, I am a Muslim man, I'm a Muslim woman, I'm a Muslim man, I'm a Muslim born into a man's body, but I see myself as a woman, but I prefer to sleep with men who are Christian. This sort of thing. That's all being somebody. Do you see? That's all being someone. So the ego is conditioned. You have a penis, so you're wearing blue, and you have a vagina, so you're wearing pink, and you're getting a train for Christmas, and you're getting a cooking set, and you're taking auto mechanics, and you're taking home economics. I don't know if they have home economics anymore, but all the boys took wood shop or auto mechanics, and all the girls took home ec. And the thing is, the guys knew they were getting a better deal. We knew we were getting a better, because one, we were getting to make cool stuff, and two, they were learning to cook for us. And we talked about it. We thought, this is great. Who thought this up? Okay, that was the 70s. So the ego is self-centered. The ego is a healthy stage of development, but it becomes inflated as the center of the self, and spiritual development has significantly to do with not eliminating one's ego or killing one's ego, which is a myth. No person's ego has ever died. That's a myth that was born in mythic forms of consciousness 700 to 300 BC. The ego is a perfectly healthy part of the self, and you can't really develop meaningfully beyond it until you've healthfully consolidated it. But its nature is to be self-centered. It's it is the main force of resistance to wholesome, integrative, evolutionary change. It is the part of our, in the face of our recognition that we could be and we could do better. The ego is the part of ourself that has no interest in it. The ego will love hiking Machu Picchu, taking ayahuasca, getting a sound bath on ayahuasca while it has tantric sex with 12 people of its gender choosing. It loves chocolate and mud packs and massages and weekends at Kripalu and all that kind of stuff. So the ego will love all that, but in the end, it only takes from any experience it gets what it can use to preserve things exactly as they are so the person doesn't change. Its sole motive is to conserve the past and to resist development, because all development proceeds toward a place where the ego has to give up the center ring at the carnival and is now relegated more to like a sideshow. It's not that it dies, it just becomes less inflated and takes its rightful and more proportionate place within the self. And the ego and the superego is a part of the ego that are all the rules and roles conditioned by society. The ego and the superego are the parts of the self that repress the emergence of the life force, eros, the creative impulse, consciousness as love. Because the only direction of love is toward the recognition of no other. And the ego's sole function is to create the illusion of there being other. And it does that through fear and in training a person to fear and desire, through fear and desire. Fear in water and desire in fire. The authentic self is already whole it's spontaneous and it's wild, right? At the lowest level, we can experience that when we give ourselves to the sexual impulse. This nobody who ever experienced the sexual impulse experienced something like this is really exciting. Maybe we could get together like the second Thursday of next month, right? It's more like everything off the kitchen table right here, right now, regardless of the consequences. Like it's just whole heart, it's just a wild, wild force that just wants consummation. Well, that's at the lowest level, but at the level of the heart and at the level of the throat chakra, which is communication, and at the level of the third eye, which is visionary, and at the level of the GV20, which is the unconditionally loving witness, and beyond that non-duality, there are just higher and higher and higher forms of union, which are, as I said in the beginning, less messy, create less complexity. So the ego, as opposed to conserving the past, the ego wants to conserve the past. The authentic self is just this relentless, wholehearted, creative push toward creating the future. It expresses itself as I can, I will, I must. When? Now. But what about this? What about that? The ego's the part that says this all sounds very good, but I got to take care of this and I got to take care of that. And I'm really interested in spirit and spiritual development. I'm really interested in awakening to the degree that it's convenient and pleasant and generates pleasant feelings and positive emotions. And I'm definitely interested if it helps me like sell more soap. Right? If it helps me sell more soap, then it's good. And if I'm not selling enough soap, it must be because I'm not spiritually aligned, right? But the authentic self isn't interested in there's in any excuse or any reason we have that our recognition of oneness and wholeness and letting just infinite care and infinite love just explode into our hearts, explode into our minds, to recognize ourselves as that motive force that said yes to becoming, to recognize that we as the life force are the Big Bang and in no way separate from it. The authentic self isn't interested in excuses or anything that's in the way right now of stopping me from giving myself to my highest and deepest and most beautiful and most moving recognition. So, whereas the ego is resisting wholesome change, the authentic self catalyzes emergence. And the Bodhisattva vow says, may I be the doctor and the medicine. May no interaction ever be insignificant. The authentic self recognizes all we have is this moment, and every communication is an opportunity to throw off the veils and to give ourselves to the very reason we said yes to becoming in the first place. Whereas the ego represses, the authentic self faces everything that must be faced for the sake of freedom. The ego's view is I am a victim of circumstances. And for most individuals, I mean, for all individuals, to the degree they're unawake, the most significant force into who they are in any moment is who they've been and what has happened to them. Their history, the unawakened individual, the most significant force into who they are in this moment is their history. And to the awakened individual, the most significant input into who they are in any moment is the future they intuit in their deepest heart is possible. And they're not going to wait a minute, a week, a month, a year, a second, 10 years, a decade, a second. They're not going to wait a second. It's right here and it's right now. It's right here and it's right now. And there's nothing in the way, and I don't need any more time. I'm done waiting. I'm done being a victim. But what about this? And what about that? And my mom did this, and my dad did that, and my brother did this, and the priest did that, and this and that, and the other thing. And there may be a lot there, but everything that's there is going to be most usefully addressed from the perspective of the part of oneself that has always been, is, and will always be free in the face of it. We're discussing this polarity to understand the nature of the dynamism of the forces at work within the individual. Can these coexist? Yes, they do coexist, but they're in constant conflict in most individuals. The point is to be awake enough that the ego and the superego and all their functions become objects in awareness that we could take a free and easy and liberated relationship to, so that when the ego is expressing within us, when the superego is expressing within us, when we are triggered, when conditioning is arising, we have ever increasing degrees of free will in the face of it and can see it and make a different choice. And every time we make a choice, a wholesome choice, to give ourselves to something deeper and something higher in the face of the onslaught of our conditioning, we gain another degree of freedom. And it's not just my personal freedom or your personal freedom. Consciousness itself is liberated through the entire vehicle of the cosmos. Now, that sounds grandiose, but it's true. We all understand as acupuncturists. I mean, all of acupuncture is just based on is more or less based on the theory that a very small change in signal in a very small but not insignificant part of the self can completely rectify the functioning of the entire system. So that's the whole basis of Chinese medicine. I mean, put a needle, you know, anywhere in the body and the entire system can regulate and work better in the gross physical and psychological realms, the subtle psych and soul realms, and actually have a person come into consciousness. I put a needle in a woman in 1991. It was the first needle I put in a treatment. She had an experience and came back in 2015 dying of colon cancer and said, the first needle you put in me changed my entire life, and I wanted to see you again one last time. There's a case study under colon, I think, in Nourishing Destiny for her. See the Nourishing Destiny or the Red Book, the clinical practice book. Here we have an archetypical representation I came up with that I still, every time I see it, I think, damn, I did a good job with this. This is sort of drawing on some Jungian work, but it's, here we have the Uberus, the Ouroboros. I have portrayed the Sheng cycle as the snake swallowing its own tail, because believe it or not, the Sheng cycle is samsara. Sheng is birth, and we have birth in water, death in metal. Birth, death. birth, death. And you put the characters for birth and death together, you get samsara. We divide the Sheng cycle in half, and we have the left hand pulses, kidney, liver, heart, and the right hand pulses, pericardium, three heater, or if you will, kidney, yang, spleen, and lungs. And of course, the other attendant organs. Here's the left pulses, here's the right pulses. Kidney 7 brings breath into form, inspiration into water, which is the moment of conception. And this is the portal between being and becoming, right between metal and water. It's the breathing of life, like in the Western tradition, God breathing life into clay. The inspiration, the breath into water, and then water grasps that breath and powers the Sheng cycle. The left hand is the rising of Eros, the erotic impulse. Eros is the creative impulse, the evolutionary impulse, the sexual impulse. It is love, it is consciousness. I use all those synonymously. Eros is the rising from kidney 1 up through GV20, and at the moment of death, the Hun goes out GV20 back to the Big Dipper. At the moment of conception, the Big Dipper is the spoon that takes an apportionment of the night sky as Jing, and the stars from the moon, the stars, and the sun shine a destiny into that Jing, and that destiny is your life force, and it burns its way your whole life up your spine, ideally liberating itself at every increasing center to engender whole new worldviews and capacities, all the way up to the seventh chakra, GV20, witness and non-dual consciousness. Eros is the rising of the life force, and we can understand that as kidney and liver yang rising from kidney 1. Kidney 1 is the eye on the bottom of the foot. The tree sends roots down to grasp the water, stretches its uppermost branches toward heaven, and then the soul at death leaves and ascends back to heaven as light to report on the merit accrued in this lifetime. The function of the kidney, the liver, and the heart are evolution. That side of the pulse has to deal with the question, existentially, of how is it that life, that light, how is it that the physiological function of the human vehicle engenders light as virtue? And that's Eros. And we can define Eros as the love and striving of the lower for the higher. Eros is the love and striving of the lower for the higher. The right side, we have the digestive system, the right side pulses. Pericardium digests relationship. Spleen digests food and fluid. And the lungs digest fluid and air. This is evolution, and this is involution. Evolution is how does light arise to return to origin through the vehicle and get raised in status through the practice of life. How do we return more than we started with alchemically? How do we become a source of light, returning light back to heaven? Involution is how do we receive light from heaven and turn it into blood and bone and muscle? This is how does light arise through the body. This is how does the body arise from light. The pericardium digests the light of relationship. The digestive system has to absorb the amino acids from Mother Earth, but the colon is absorbing minerals, and minerals are diamonds and gold. And what are they? They are light, they are sunlight concretized within the earth, within the digestive system. The only place in the universe hot enough for two gold atoms to fuse is in a star that is dying. When stars go supernova, they achieve heats that can create gold. All the gold on this planet, which is only about two Olympic swimming pools, all the gold that's ever been harvested in human history would fill two Olympic swimming pools. And it all comes from stars that died, hurtling through space in an explosion. It is the function of the colon to abstract light from muck. And that's what the bacteria in the colon does, is it turns feces into ATP. And that is the Po. So this is the Hun, the creative evolutionary force, the Po. The first usage of Po in Chinese history, I think, is in the Tzuchuan, and it relates to the waxing phase of the moon. So the moon is gathering light, and the Chinese considered that the moon, as it's gathering light, is collecting light from the souls of the dead. And then as it begins with the full moon, it begins to give that up and send that light back to the North Star, which is the central administration of human destiny. Whereas Eros was the love and striving of the lower for the higher, agape is the love and embrace of the higher for the lower. And this is involution. So the Queen Mother, who is the sort of the Chinese version of Kali, she presides over the womb and the tomb. And this is the juncture, this is her portal between existence and non-existence. So when we become, metal comes into water, and when we die, the two halves of the cycle separate. Breath can't engender the kidneys anymore. The kidneys can't grasp the chi. The person stops breathing, and that's death. Kidney 7 is the main point to create that balance, to re-inseminate the individual over and over by tonifying kidney yang and bring it back to the root. And we're going to look at this in terms of the I Ching, this whole dynamic. So if, I'm talking about it now, but we're going to go over and over it and really look at the physiology of it. Any questions on this so far? Okay, everybody's doing good. Feel free at any time to ask a question. So I want to talk about this wheel here. I want to talk about this a little bit, the 5-element wheel. So this is samsara. It's a conditioned cycle of thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation. And it spins and spins and spins, and we get caught up in it, and it goes so fast that we begin to only know ourselves as the biographic self. And when you ask a person who they are, almost everyone will tell you what's happened to them. So we're all taught when we do an intake, you're taught to ask all these questions. And if you look at the questions, you're actually, to get to know who your patient is, you're asking what has happened to you in your life, which is a completely victimized Phew. I am what's happened to me. See, it just reinforces the notion I am what's happened to me. The superior physician asks those questions, but is more interested not in what happened to the person, but in the quality of their relationship to what happened to them. So the force of habit has a momentum. We're spinning around in the wheel, considering ourselves a victim of circumstances. The Big Dipper is a metaphor for just the spoon churning us through our fate. What we want to wake up to is destiny. Destiny is a co creative relationship to emptiness and to luminosity where we recognize who we are not as what's happened to us, but as the essential choice to become and the inherent goodness of the choice to become. Recognizing that nothing ever happened to it. So every choice we make spins the wheel faster and faster until we feel like we have no choice. Then you're smoking a cigarette and you put it in an ashtray for a second. And I've seen, back in the day, I remember people doing this. They light a cigarette, take two puffs, put it in an ashtray. 20 seconds later, they light another cigarette, but they have a cigarette and they don't even realize that they're just on automatic. And many people are like that with eating, scrolling, drinking, pornography, sex, gambling, and and then I mean, drugs and then even more subtle addictions. Uh, when we get past the larger addictions, then just paying attention to thoughts like I'm special, I'm superior, I'm really stupid, I'm the best, I'm the worst, I can't sing, I'm ugly, I'm beautiful, I'm worthless. And, just it doesn't matter. It's equally diluted, whether it's what we call a negative thought or a positive thought. It's all just still thought. And thought is not self. The point is to be free. A crazy person is a person who believes something because they're the ones thinking it. I always give the example. I remember a patient came to me and I said, "What are you here for?" This was almost 40 years ago. I've been practicing 41 years now. I said, "What are you here for?" And they said, "I'm here to lose weight. I've lost 50 pounds 3 times before, but I can't keep it off because I'm a wimp and I have absolutely um, no willpower and no self-control. I'm pathetic." And they said that to me, and I thought to myself, if they met someone down in the alley and the person said, "What are you doing in Stockbridge?" And they said, "Oh, I have an appointment for acupuncture with Lonnie Jarrett." And the person said, "What are you coming for?" And they said, "Oh, I'm going to lose weight." If the person said, "Come on, you've lost 50 pounds 3 times before. You can't keep it off. You're a wimp. You have no willpower and you're pathetic." That person would go home and say, I met Lisa today in the alley before my acupuncture appointment. What a bitch. I'm never talking to her again. But you have the same thought and you bow down and you think this got to be true. I'm the one that's thinking it. A crazy person is a person who pays attention to emotions and thoughts they have because they're the one having them. But if anyone else had them, they'd pay no they'd be insulted. That's one of the foundations of narcissism is because I'm the one experiencing it, it must be important. It must be meaningful because it's happening to me. It has inherent meaning because it's my experience. But anybody else's experience, it wouldn't mean a thing. So the Taoists text, the cultivational texts use the metaphor all the time of stepping to the center of the circle, turning around the dipper handle, making it spin in the opposite direction, and becoming renouncing fate. Fate is the kind of stuff like nine-star chi and all these kind of numerological Chinese dinner menu stuff. If you're a penguin, you shouldn't marry a pig, that kind of thing, right? That's fate. Renouncing fate and instead becoming the master of your own destiny. In other words, giving up victimization, recognizing you're the one who made the choice to be here. The universe is your project, and you, if no one else will do it, then you're the one solely responsible for the outcome. It's up to you, and the outcome is in your hands. And then we can awaken to a bodhisattvic form of infinite care where the heart, we're just willing to live with a broken heart and we're going to give it anything and die trying. And then come back and do it again and come back and do it again. I was teaching with a few years ago with a very beautiful Tibetan Rinpoche, and he had invited me to teach on a retreat with him. And he made a small quip about something and said to the audience, well, maybe I won't have to come back in my next lifetime. And I said, well, I'm not only coming back next time, my vow is to come back until all matter in the universe recognizes itself as love. And he said, what then? And I said, then we're going to do it again. I mean, so sort of the traditional view is it sucks to be here. And you could understand why that would be from a culture where the destiny of 98% of the population was to work their entire lives to pay for the emperor's funeral. Literally. Like I read a paper once about 40 years ago now from a journal in the I think it was the North China branch of the Royal Asiatic Register, and they estimated that like 85% of the budget in China historically went for paying for the emperor's funeral. Almost all people in China worked to pay taxes to pay to bury the emperor. That was their whole life. So it makes sense, like in those circumstances, you wouldn't want to come back. But man, we got to hear the Beatles. We haven't had, as bad as some of us may have had it, and probably some of us have had it much worse than I have, although my heart was broken, because that's just destiny. Everybody experiences the trauma, the contraction, and a broken heart. But the degree that we experience these things differs, and many of us have been very privileged. I mean, anyone on this call who had the money to pay for it is living in the top 5% of all human beings who've ever lived. For the people on this call, the way our life looks today is more significantly the outcome of choices we were free to make than any other human beings who've lived in history, and that included the emperors and queens and kings and pharaohs. So meditation is the step off the wheel to the center. It gives us objectivity and lets us step off the gerbil wheel so it spins around us to discover the dimension of our own self where nothing happened, nothing is happening, nothing will ever happen, there's nothing to overcome, and nothing moves. And we can recognize it is possible to experience and to see and become doubtless in that vision that space is infinite and time is infinite. And space exists in a single point, and time exists in a single moment. And we are that infinite space and time, and we are all together in that single point and moment together, and there's no separation, and we are just one. And the goal through cultivation would be to become doubtless about this, to become doubtless about this. But to become doubtless about this means that the ego, as the separate self sense, has to be made to live with a knee bent. And the goal would be, of course, bodhisattvically speaking, to come to a point where we recognize not just ourselves, but everything and everyone as oneself, as God, and we treated every human being accordingly, with the care that you'd give your newborn child or your new puppy, the care that you wish that you had had in your moment of pain when you were young and confused and overwhelmed in the face of what might have been a horror. So this is a cycle of conditioned thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation. It's psychophysiology. And it's conditioned, and it's called the five elements, the Wu Xing. And that character Xing means transformation. Montford Porkert, who I got a chance to study with when I was young, he was the two last great sinologists on planet Earth were Montford Porkert, classically trained sinologist, and Paul Unshold. And Porkert died about 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. I fortunately got to study with him. And he called these the five evolutive phases. That character Xing in Buddhism means samskara. And samskara is the conditioning influence of experience. And the five elements from a Buddhist point of view are the five conditioning influences. And each individual at the moment of conception incarnates into this whole wheel, but it's slightly skewed toward one of these, and that's a person's constitution. So the person stuck in the wheel is conditioned by thought. Thoughts are like, I'm a Jewish boy, and this is what good Jewish boys do. I'm a Christian girl. I'm a Catholic girl. I'm a Muslim boy. I'm a Muslim girl. I'm a boy because I have a penis. I'm a girl because I have a vagina. I'm an American Jewish boy, and this is what a good American does. Those are thoughts. And feelings are all the same feelings that everyone has. No one here has ever had a feeling that if any of us were in your body and you were feeling it, we wouldn't immediately know what it was. If you were in my body, no one would be like Spock on the Enterprise when he ate that weird fruit and all of a sudden couldn't orient because he had emotions for the first time in his life. If I was angry and you were in my body, go, Lonnie's angry. If you were sad and I was in your body, I'd say, oh, Wayne's sad or Tracy's sad. Only so many emotions. So this is a cycle of thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation. And it's a cycle of conditioned weather. It's conditioned by weather and it's conditioned by culture. So we have internal conditioning and we have external conditioning. And we're just caught up in this. And the point is that there's this force that's always exploding through it. Now, by being in relationship to someone who's really awoken to this and spending some time with them and speaking with them or just being in their presence, through resonance, it can be activated within. Through taking time to meditate and contemplate and renouncing the content of thought, feeling, emotion, sensation, we can awaken to it. And there are certain molecules we can swallow, hopefully respectfully, as medicine that will engender an experience of this dimension of the self very, very quickly. You know, psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD and mescaline peyote, these things. So that can break contemplation, meditation, or just spontaneous insight, or taking certain medicines can awaken us to a truth of who and what we are beyond all the conditioning. The only thing is when that all wears off, it's our conditioned self that's going to interpret the experience. And the ego will always do that in a way that negates everything that challenges it as the central authority within the self. Here are depictions of the Big Dipper on the solstices and equinoxes. That's where the swastika comes from. The swastika is the Big Dipper on the solstices and equinoxes. And that's why it's on pottery in every culture going back, thousands of years. And here it is depicted in the Asian tradition. And here is the Taoist meditator. The Big Dipper has 7 stars, and the middle star is Tian Shu, which is the name of stomach 25, heavenly pivot. And the Big Dipper, the Taoist is meditating, and directly over GV20 is heavenly pivot, and he's reversing the course of the handle to become a master. He's stepping off the wheel, renouncing experience to become a master of his own fate. And of course, this character, Pivot Shu, figures centrally in the Ling Shu, the spiritual pivot. Talking about the portal between metal and water, between non existence and existence, the alchemist Lida Kwan says the heart of heaven and earth, where is it stored? Yin and yang stimulated to manifest the sphere of light. The gate of birth and the door of death are immaterial, formless passages. By following yin, one dies. By returning the heavenly yang, one lives. Hence, they are called the gate of birth and the door of death. But in reality, they're just one opening, and it has no location and no place. Why is that important? Because in the Nanqing, the author of the Nanqing, when talking about GV4, Governor 4, the gate of destiny, says it is just a universal function that has no location and no place, using the exact same characters. Governor 4 within the human being physiologically is the functionally manifest and subsequently embodied, simultaneously embodied manifestation as the portal between existence and non-existence. And who governs this portal? Zi Wang Mu, the Queen Mother of the West. West is the direction of death. She lives on Kunlun Mountain and she dines with Lao Tzu on the peaches of immortality. And she presides over the womb and the tomb. And sometimes she's depicted sort of like as a wrathful deity, and sometimes as a very beautiful woman. This is the Sombrero Galaxy taken through the Hubble telescope. That is, if you showed this to Louis Ming, or Lao Tzu, he'd go, "That's it." So this is just the first time this picture came back and they put it in. I remember the day it was up on the internet and I said, "Oh my God, that's it. That's emptiness and luminosity. That's who we are, fire burning in emptiness." We already actually looked at this. We don't have to go through it. It's the same figure that had the snake. We looked at it already. Kidney 7. I want to see something here. Okay. This is the triagram for water down here. Can people see my cursor moving around on the screen? This is the triagram for water. Two yin lines with a yang line between them. The yin line is water, the yang line is metal. The yin is the mother's blood, the yang is the father's jing. The yin lines are the vagina, the yang line is the penis. The triagram for water depicts the moment of conception, breath coming into form. And Wayne, I saw you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
It was just real quick. I was trying to catch you before you go any further. On the wheel slide at the bottom, it has construct awareness as the foundation of integral consciousness. And I don't know if you addressed that.
I didn't really. Um, but I could address it quickly, which is just that there's a form of psychology called object relations, and it looks at how people at different stages of development have relationship to objects. Mm, I think most people on this call are postmodern pluralistic. Pluralistic means that you can hold multiple perspectives. You could study Vedanta, Taoism, Buddhism, Christianity, the Muslim religion, and you could find departure points and points of commonality and be interested in multiple perspectives. Most people here wouldn't say no, only Buddhism got it right, because that's fundamentalist. Most people could read different traditions and hold different perspectives simultaneously. I think most people here are aware that the notion of race is a construct and isn't real. That if you just line 7.5 billion people up in a straight line, you would just get a rainbow of various hues. And that the whole idea of different ethnic races is just a construct which is racist and doesn't really exist. There's no pure black person. I mean, you know, Tilda Swinton might be as close as you get to an archetypical white person. But if you looked at her DNA, probably going back generations, there's another reality. At any rate, I think we'd all be aware that most of us are either aware of or starting to suspect that gender has a gross physical aspect, but also subtle psyche and soul aspects. And the physical aspect is only the physical aspect. That you can have the physical aspect of a gender, but the psyche and the soul aspect of another gender. And that gender itself is actually a construct. Physical sex isn't a construct, but gender is a construct. Okay. Fewer of us might understand that the chair you're sitting in is a construct. Construct awareness is the understanding that there is no ultimate universe out there that's real that we learn about through rational science and study, that science isn't discovering an ultimate pre-existing reality, that our methodologies are actually summoning forth the reality dependent on the methodologies we use and who's looking at it. that the entire universe as it is and as it occurs to you in this instant is a projection of your own being and is constructed and not independently existing? That, that has everything to do with freedom in relationship to the circle we talked about. It's a rather advanced form of freedom in relationship to it. Okay? Okay. So kidney 7 is the metal in the water. That's not abstract to anyone. It's the metal point on the water meridian. When a person has a husband-wife imbalance, the pulses on their left hand, all the pulses, 3 fingers left hand, all the pulses are deep and feeble to absent. The whole left hand is collapsed. The right hand is working harder. Why? Because the innate life force, the person's will has collapsed in life. Their resources run out. And the digestive system is working as hard as it can to abstract chi and resources from relationship, food, and air to keep a person alive because their internal resources are so deficient. And the acupuncture point that revives willpower to get a person to want to live, to help them turn everything around when they're at rock bottom, is kidney 7. Because it's the point that engenders conception and revitalizes, um, inspires in the sense of lung, inspires the person to then breathe back into their jing and conceive a new self, a spiritual embryo, which has lost its victimization and renounced its cynicism to come to a place where the individual is no longer victim of the past. Every alcoholic, every drug addict, every addict who ever hit rock bottom and survived and lived and became sober made a choice. And that choice was born in the spiritual realization in a moment that despite the past I've lived and everything that happened up to this moment, in this moment, I can make a choice and take that choice forward to create a new life. Not just for me, but for my family, for my loved ones, for culture, and ultimately for the cosmos itself. If you want to blow it up, I mean, many people never get that big, but the 12 steps certainly offer the possibility. That's why the 12 steps are a collective emergence, not just helping a person go it alone. So kidney 7 is that point. And the name of kidney 7 is FULIU, returning current. Birth, death, birth, death. As long as you can make this jump from metal to water across the great divide, you can become again. And when you stop making this is why most people die 3 to 5 in the morning. It's why most people who are really fragile, I've predicted 2 or 3 deaths in my clinical practice when people said, "When will I die?" or "When will my partner die?" And I said, "First frost." And that person died first frost because the killing cold comes and then they can't make this connection. They were making it, they got a flourish of yang in June and July and picked up. And then in August, it started waning, and in September. And I said, first week of October, second, third week of October, frost outside, and they die at 3, 4 in the morning. Lung time, lung and colon time. The metal can't make the jump back into water. Kidney 7 pulls it to make that jump, to reconvene, to reconceive. a new self so that the person drops the cynicisms, drops the doubt, drops the victimization, drops any inherent sense of limitation to have the humility to recognize that I'm not a victim. I made the choice to be here. I am the life force itself. I am the impulse toward the true, the good, and the beautiful. And even though I have pain, even though I have suffering, which may be overwhelming, this part of me was never touched. It never gave up on me. I gave up on it. I walled it off as a protective mechanism to keep it safe and to keep it precious. But it's a miracle. Here it is. And it's never been touched. To the deepest and best part of myself, nothing ever happened. And then in that, you can drop to your knees and your heart can break open and you can cry, be overwhelmed with tears and grace and experience grace and experience gratitude and recognize that the rest of my life is for this. I'm done healing. I'm done spending time on my problems. It's not about me. It never was about me. I have always been this, and this is untouched. And this part of myself, the bags have always been packed at the curb, ready to go, and it's been waiting for me. And in deep contemplation or meditation or on ayahuasca, the medicine can say to you, which mythically or superstitiously can appear as other, but in reality is just the unconditionally loving witness with one's own self. And that part of ourself, which is consciousness, has always been looking, and it says to us, I never left you. I've been speaking to you every moment of every day. You don't listen. And it turns out that the better path of part of this, one of the most significant parts of the spiritual path is learning to listen. Listening is the deepest, highest, and surest manifestation of love. The kind of listening is the kind of listening a mother or father has toward their newborn baby. You bring it home from the hospital, it's laying at the foot of your bed in a crib or it's right between you, and you're exhausted. You haven't slept in 2 days, and you fall deep asleep, and in your deepest sleep, you're listening to whether the baby's still breathing. That kind of listening. And that's the kind of listening we do with our heart. That's the kind of listening we do with our soul. And it's born of a profound, viscerally felt care. It profoundly matters to us. We really, really care. We profoundly care. My observation is that there's been far more cultivation and far more meditation retreats and far more LSD and tantric sex and chocolate eaten than there has actually been development, meaningful development in relationship to any of that. And my conclusion is because actually people don't care. They're entertaining themselves with all these things to the degree that they feel good and provide expanded states. But we can arrive at a moment where we actually where our motivation shifts from a self-centered motivation to just do all this to overcome my own suffering to just a profound recognition of who and what we are that just explodes in one's heart and one's mind. That has everything to do with kidney 7 and the recognition, the rebirth, the refertilization of a spiritual embryo then we then hold in our hands with the deepest and most profound tender care. that we cultivate with every choice we make, with every significant choice we make. I had one teacher who used to say, I'm not talking about like, should I have rice or should I have pasta? We're talking about the significant choices. And those significant choices are made every day in relationship to our families, our friends, and every stranger we meet on the street. So kidney 7 is called returning current, and look what the meridian does. Kidney 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a kidney 7 that it makes the full turn. It's a kidney 7 that it makes the full turn. The kidney meridian here is just recapitulating the physiology of having gotten lost, hitting rock bottom, and then turning to continue our ascent of potential straight up. Here's a picture of Lao Tzu with a peach. There are several interesting things about this picture of Lao Tzu. Now, this is a very typical picture. Lao Tzu has a large head. Why? Symbolically, the jing in the form of marrow has been transformed through cultivation, so it has risen up his spine to create bone to encase his larger brain, which is marrow, and the large skull and the large brain are physiological metaphors for wisdom. And the definition of wisdom is knowledge of emptiness, knowledge of the self of emptiness. Having let go of fear, giving up, relegating the ego and the intellectual mind to a more proportional place within the self, becoming not an ego, but a soul. And not just a soul, but the unconditionally loving witness. And beyond the witness, the recognition that we are one. There is no separation. We are one. The peach stands for kidney 7. You can eat the entire peach, but as long as you have the pit, you can get a whole new orchard. Kidney 7 is the pit of the peach. And then look at the shape of this gourd. Conception vessel and governor vessel. It's the infinity sign. It's the Uberos, the first division. Here's wholeness and the recognition of wholeness through the recognition of the self as emptiness and luminosity, changing the two back into one. And the Chinese creation myth is that the floods come and the primordial brother and sister, the whole human race is wiped out except for the primordial brother and sister who float in a gourd to the top of Kunlun Mountain to incestuously give rise to the human race again after the flood. And what is CV1? CV1 is named the Golden Gate, which is the name of the Queen Mother's portal. And what's it for? Revival from drowning. Here we have the I Ching, hexagram 23 and hexagram 24. We're going through this tonight because I think it really does help to get verbal transmission. But I have written about this in great depth in all 3 books. There's a whole chapter in Nourishing Destiny, another chapter elaborating from a whole different perspective in clinical practice. And then I address the whole thing again, particularly in the appendix of deepening perspectives. Hexagram 23 is five yin lines and a yang line. It is a house of cards. It is a building with a roof and no foundation. Physiologically, it is the empty pulse. You feel the pulse on top pounding, but as soon as you press, the pulse splits. And there's nothing under it. So you can feel a very strong pulse, but with just a little pressure, the whole thing goes like there's the pulse, and you press, and the whole thing just it goes. Let's see if I can. It goes like this. I feel the resistance up top, but as soon as I press, it never comes back. You see? That's the empty pulse. And hexagram 23 is for the fall equinox. And it's metal. And it's called Po. It's a different character, but Po is the spirit of metal. And it's called splitting apart. Because when that last yang line is gone, here, you just have yin lines. You have no yang, no luminosity, no heat, no warmth, catalyzing emergence, transforming, lifting up. No intelligence left, no spirit left. You have form, but no spirit. And you just get hexagram 2, which is the receptive. And corpses have form. A corpse has as much physical form as it does the moment after the moment of death that it did before the moment of death. What's different is it loses its warmth, it loses its fire. So when that last line goes, there's just death. So it's called splitting apart. Kidney 7 takes that yang line down to the bottom, tonifies yang at the root. We're at rock bottom, but in the moment of rock bottom, our greatest loss, our heart breaks open and we realize that dimension of the self that wasn't wounded, wasn't traumatized. We realize I'm going to die. I have a choice. Do I want it? If I have one more drink, I'm dead. I'd rather die than do what I'd rather die than have the affair. I'd rather die than hurt another human being or hurt myself again. People who commit suicide do it because they choose to kill the physical form of themselves because they can't see any way to let go and gain freedom in the face of the part of themselves that's making these choices, that's causing them and everyone else so much pain and suffering. So they consider the only choice they have is to end the vehicle. And Eckhart Tolle and also a man named Babaji, who was the teacher of my first teacher, Amrita Sai, they were both became enlightened when they were committing suicide. Babaji was on a bridge and was going to jump off, and Eckhart Tolle was about to commit suicide, and they both realized it's not the body that has to die. The vehicle as it is right now, my mind, my body, with all my memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations as they are. Who I am right now, as I am, with my entire history and my entire people's history, is the perfect vehicle in which, in this moment, to manifest freedom. And that's a choice because I've always been free. I am free, and I never could be anything but free. Kidney 7 this is pride and the superficial self, the frontal self, it's self-image. It's the self we believe deludedly that everyone else sees ourselves the same way we see ourselves as. And we bend a knee and it breaks the back of the ego. It bends its knees, brings down the young, and then we can make new choices based on having been born again until this becomes 6 yang lines. And the 6 yang lines are hexagram number 1. Hexagram number 2 is yin, it is death. It is pure receptivity with no activating influences. It's pure yin. This is pure yang. It's the rainbow body. It's the illumined self, the authentic self. It's the part of you that is the best part of you that cares so profoundly and has such profound gratitude for the opportunity afforded you in this incarnation to be here and do this work and hear these words and understand them, that it just breaks the heart open to realize that we are here for each other and that all those problems we had, which seem so consequential and so impossible and so important to overcome, are not in the way of us manifesting the deepest and highest purpose that we said yes to this incarnation for, and they've never been in the way. And this is in Buddhism and Taoism, this would be the myth of the rainbow body. I'm not really going to go through this right now, but it's the appendix of my Green Deepening Perspective book, and it's Chinese physiology, and it basically shows us the functioning of Ming Men in relationship to the sensory orifices, which bring in life conditioning. And I discussed the physiology of freedom and conditioning. And I discuss acupuncture in terms of evolutionary physiology and how the Ren and the Du vessels and the kidney and stomach vessels and the chakras and the dantians create a hierarchy with a developmental hierarchy within the self. And how we can, I lay out the map of Chinese medicine as a science of development in that appendix. In what would be the next book I would write in this series if I knew assuredly that I was going to live to like 150. But since these books take me about 15 to 17 years apiece and I'm 67, I'm being cautiously optimistic. And I know that another individual is writing the books now and they will be beautiful. I've been proofreading them and the first edition will be available sometime this year and they will be lovely. And I'll let you all know when they're out. I don't think we need to go through this. This is the first chapter in my Red Clinical Practice book. I want to get to what this is. We've talked about all the physiology, and anyone who studied with me knows I'm very big on philosophical context. And if you studied with me for a number of years, you've heard me say everything I've said so far multiple times. But even as I speak it now, I just feel always so inspired, and I feel there's something new in it and something deeper each time. So, I mean, hopefully that's your experience too. It was my experience with Leon Hammer, for instance. I took, all he taught was 2 weekends when I studied with him. And I took those 2 weekends 4 times a year for 10 years. And we had a lot of other contact and communication, but essentially took the same 2 weekends. I did them 40 times. And it was different every time. Learned something new. Could always, because you're different, right? So you hear it more deeply. I want to talk about the turning point. I want to talk about this moment of being brought to our knees and making a choice. And we make that choice and we begin to work. just as our negative choices and our conditioned choices, the choices, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and the rules and the roles conditioned into us by culture have perpetuated a habitual momentum in us to unconsciously keep bringing the worst from the past into the future through the present and being a vehicle for that. Just as we broke that momentum in a moment of insight and clarity, we begin now to make new choices. And as we make that the cleaner you eat, the cleaner you want to eat. The better you take care of yourself, the better you want to take care of yourself. The kinder you are, the kinder you want to be. The only thing that engenders virtue is acting virtuously. The more we give ourselves to the best part of us, we fall in love with the creative impulse, with Eros. We fall in love with soul. We fall in love with spirit. We fall in love with love. And the more we give ourselves to it, the more of a place within us it has to spontaneously manifest pre-thought so it becomes a habit. There comes a point in the restitution of the authentic self as the foundation of the self, where the fundamental goodness in the fundamental upright influences of Jing, Qi, and Shen, the goodness, the true, the good, the beautiful, love, creativity, as the force of all creation, are at the point of becoming instituted within us as the center, at the center ring, at the center of the self to displace the ego. And at the moment of this, where we're about to put our foot on the distant shore, it's a very, very delicate moment because the ego has access to everything we've learned and knows how to use everything that we've learned from all of our cultivation, from all of our spiritual work to inflate our sense of separation and superiority. The ego is right there learning everything we're learning how to use it to maintain the separate self sense and to create karma. And you can just see this with all the teachers who've created, who were enlightened to be in their presence for even a moment was to have one's heart and mind explode in love and self and recognition of oneself and truth. And it's just confusing that to be in their presence could do that, and yet they were thieves and rapists. And I'm not talking about a few people. I'm talking about most of them. Because power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And one can gain the capacity to awaken others to higher state experiences, but still be at very low stages of development. Very low stages of development. So teachers can be very powerful in a powerful transmission and still be completely corrupt. And that can be very confusing. It isn't the slightest bit confusing to me anymore, but it can be very confusing. The I Ching tells us several times that when the fox is crossing the river, it has to be careful not even to get the tip of its tail wet. Crossing the river is a metaphor for going to the distant shore, for not stopping halfway, but for going all the way to the distant shore. The metaphor of the fox not getting its tail wet is the recognition that if its tail gets wet, it won't be long before the whole fox is in the soup. Getting its tail wet is the person saying, I haven't drunk in 2 years. I can have one shot. I haven't smoked. I can have a puff now and then. No harm in having a little quickie. I'll just put a quarter in the slot machine, you see? And then in that moment of making that choice, the entire framework within oneself, which hasn't gone anywhere, is reactivated with a vengeance. And the ego comes roaring back saying, see, I told you so. I told you it wasn't real. I told you you couldn't do it. I told you you're a failure. And then the whole thing just crashes. And the person who, to everyone outside of themselves, seemed like they've really turned, they've really made it, doesn't make it. They fail. The patient comes in and they're doing great, and usually and they're telling you over and over, they're doing good, they're doing good, they're doing good, and they're making progress, they're having deep conversations, and it comes up to about a year of treatment, or a year from their divorce, or a year from the death of a loved one, or the year from some trauma, or the anniversary. And they come in and all of a sudden they're like, I'm right back to where I started. Like, well, what do you mean? Nothing's happened. I haven't gotten better. And I would start reading them quotes. I would just randomly turn to pages and say, on this date, you said, it's like I've been born again. I have a complete new beginning. I find it almost impossible to tolerate cynicism from anybody. If I can do this, anyone can do this. And they go, yeah, I was feeling that then. Well, it isn't a feeling, it's a worldview. It's not a feeling. If it's just a feeling, it isn't real. Anybody, if they're feeling good and feeling elated and feeling bliss and having positive thoughts and making and selling lots of soap, can be open-hearted and generous. The only thing that matters is how are we when things are difficult. So it is a very delicate moment when people start to do well. I have noticed throughout my practice when people are doing really well and they stop following my advice and they come back in and say, well, it was my sister's birthday, so I ate 3 pieces of cake. Or it was my sister's birthday, so I had just, one glass of champagne and that led to another. And all the symptoms come back. They came in, we did the first treatment, they started getting better, they got consistently better. Then they make that choice and it all goes to hell. It's going to take them 20 treatments now to get back to where they were after only 3 in the beginning. Why? Because now they're cynical. Their cynicisms, now they're cynical. Now they're really reinforced the doubt. You have to give everything to a positive motivation. Once you've experienced grace and you fall into your knees and you see and you know what you are as God, whatever that is to you, as spirit, as love, as the creative impulse, when you awaken to the infinite kindness, the infinite care, if you go against that, it's just heartbreaking. You have to just give and give and give and give to it. You can't go back. So the I Ching tells us perseverance furthers. Keep going, keep going, keep going. There's a thing called ego backlash. The ego has access to every thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation we have. I think we're all old enough that we've had did you ever like make love with someone and you were very expansive and it was very beautiful? And then 5 minutes later, you're having a hard time making eye contact because you feel like you showed too much of yourself. It can be the same thing like if you're teaching and you're really open-hearted in front of a group. Now, I remember, for instance, my friends and I, when we were uh, 15 or 16, we went away for 4 days to a, um, a place called Colebrook, Connecticut for like kind of a nature camp with our high school class. And four or five of my friends took LSD and we sat out on the dock and we were listening on the like to Yes on the radio and the Beatles, and we were looking at each other, and like for a few hours it was like, I love you. Oh, I love you. We're such good friends. I love you so much. And all of a sudden the drugs started wearing off and we all went kind of like, gave each other the side eye because we had been so open and now all of a sudden the boundaries were coming back in. So there's this thing called ego backlash, which is when we make when you make a convicted choice to follow your deepest and highest heart, and you really put your stake in the ground, every force in the universe that supports that will line up into one column. And every force in the universe that opposes that and resists that change will line up into one column. And that's when you see it's not just my authentic self, there's only one. And it's not just my ego, it's a universal force that I'm standing up against. It's not Lonnie's ego, it's not Lisa or Wayne or Ray's ego. There's just one ego. It's not Lonnie or Lisa or Ray or Wayne's authentic. There's just one, and I get to make the choice. I get to make the choice. And what is my incarnation for? You see? And when we put the stake in the ground to be the agent of the true, the good, and the beautiful, we will get infinite support and infinite resistance. And we're the ones who have to, then it's up to us. And so there can be ego backlash. The ego contracts, creates cynicism and doubt because the ego has access to every thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation that it knows we're habituated and entrained to cause us to forget who and what we are and the commitment we just made. The ego takes the 2-year-old position. Nobody tells me what to do. Why shouldn't I? After all, my mother did this and my dad did that and the priest did that and the school did this and my brother did this and my husband did this and I don't get enough this and I don't get enough that and no one listens to me and I'm a big victim. So why shouldn't I put the quarter in the slot machine or drink the champagne or put the needle in my arm or have the affair or blah, 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 blah. Why shouldn't I? And then the soul, the conscience is the voice of the soul dictating to us the step we have to take to enact our life curriculum. And the ego looks at the conscience and says, you have your truth, I have my truth. Nobody knows the truth. Thanks for sharing, baby. You see? The Zhengqi is the restitution of the upright influences to go all the way to the distant shore. And it's just as we're about to get to the distant shore and really establish a homeland there that the ego freaks the fuck out and creates all this symptomatology. And the patient comes in and saying, my headaches are back, my skin condition is back, my this is back, my that's back, the other thing's back. And that's where we get to the law. And that's all creating cynicism and doubt. I'm back where I started. This hasn't worked. I'm stopping treatment. It's completely irrational. It's irrational because you read to them everything he said. We just had, 2 years or 3 years of fantastic conversations, and now you're telling me none of that was real? And this is the myth of, this is like the Roman guards come and they ask, and who was it? Was it Peter? I can never remember which says, I never met the guy. Never met the guy. Forget which one it was. Was it Paul? Can't remember. One, he says, remember Jesus at the Last Supper says, tonight one of you will deny me 3 times. And the Roman guards come and he goes, never met him. Don't know who you're talking about. That's just a metaphor for this phenomenon. The law of cure was formulated by Hahnemann, who was the founder of homeopathy in the West. And the law of cure basically says that symptoms will reappear in the reverse order they came in. They disappear from inside to outside, and they move from the center to the periphery. I have never found the last one to be true. The other two are true. In other words, when a person represses content into the interior, things move from inside to outside, and the person starts, the outside is consciousness, the inside's the unconscious, and content starts arising from consciousness to the unconscious. I mean, from unconsciousness into consciousness. And as that happens, symptoms which have been inside in the organs can now start to come out to the exterior. And the classical example of that, for instance, is a person who has eczema or psoriasis and they put on cortisone and it goes inside and the skin is all clean, but now all that heat is being forced into the organs. You start go off the cortisone, start treating the person. It takes the pathogen out of latency, and their skin is going to get much worse for a while. And they're going to want to go put cortisone on, and you say, no, let it get worse. And it comes up and up and up and up and up, and then eventually fades away and it's out. That's true. But I've never seen necessarily that it goes from the center down the arms and out the fingers or down the legs. I've treating sciatica, sometimes it goes from the lower back down to the knee and down to the ankle and out the toes. But sometimes it disappears from the toes up to the knee, up to the lower hips, up to the center of the back and then out. So I've never seen that center to the periphery really work. And I've talked to people who practiced homeopathy all their lives, and they generally agree with me. But inside to outside in reverse order seem to work. Now, the whole idea is that any true healing, whether it's acupuncture, herbs, psychotherapy, ayahuasca, whatever it is, anything that's really healing is going to get a person to a point of awakening, to a point of hitting rock bottom, to a point of restitution of the primordial energies, where they're going to have to overcome the conditioning of culture, not just in this lifetime, but one's overcome the conditioning of one's people. Mm. We're not just taking our conditioning, isn't just our conditioning. When I act less arrogantly, when I make a choice to step into the unknown, be more compassionate and less arrogant, that takes on the consciousness not just of myself, but of all Jewish men. And not just of all Jewish men, but of all men. And not just of all men, but of all humans. We're working with consciousness itself. We have access to the source. We're working with the one, the universe has infinite exteriors, but only one interior. And we're all together in that. We're working with the one interior, and the interior of the universe is consciousness. So as dysfunctional chi comes up and out, it can re-trigger the same kind of things it did when it went in. And that can have physical symptomatic implications, but it can also have psychic implications in terms of rekindling trauma and arousing memories. So we have to know how to work with those. In the fall, I'm giving a 10-month shadow work program. It's like a 2-hour, 13 2-hour classes over 10 months. where you watch videos and do readings and then come to question and answer sessions. And in that, I go into this much, much, much more deeply than I can now because we have like 17 minutes left. I won't leave right at 9:30, by the way. I'll take a few questions, but we only have, I think, one more slide. So, so when a person sees the symptoms coming back, it's that the ego can be also raising all of this back up to try to create cynicism, try to create doubt. It's a very vulnerable moment. Care must be taken. The notion of healing crisis is grossly overused. I have seen practitioners give patient herbs that gave them diarrhea for 9 months, telling the person they were cleansing. It's total bullshit. A real healing crisis lasts 72 hours and not many more minutes than that. It lasts 72 hours. That's 3 days. Three is significant. The number three is significant. Lasts 72 hours. As bad as the symptoms get, they may be as bad as they've ever been, but they never ever get worse than they've ever been. And after the 72 hours, the person has reached a whole new level, a whole new octave up in terms of freedom. And that takes place for 3 years significantly. And by 3 years, it's really established. By 7 years, if a person does due diligence, it can't be undone in this lifetime. 7 is the number of return, the loss and return of original nature. If you have what you're calling a healing crisis and it's going on a week, it ain't a healing crisis. It's gone, it's something else. If the person's having the worst symptoms they've ever had or symptoms they've never had, that's not a healing crisis. And if 3, 4 days go by and it's not much better and they don't feel a whole new level of clarity, and you don't get the sense they've made a quantum leap here, it's not a healing crisis. Something else is good. They're getting sicker, or something new is coming on. When a person has had a great loss, the first year is the hardest because it's the first birthday, it's the first Christmas, it's the first Easter, it's the first anniversary, it's the first date of this and that without the person. As the first anniversary comes by, as it leads up to it, there can be a lot of intensity where it feels like the grief is just as much as it was when the loss occurred. And this can happen each successive year, but with each successive year, it's less and less until by year 3, they should be pretty much over it. And by year 7, really have let go. Let go doesn't mean you don't miss the person. It doesn't mean you don't love the person. It means the loss isn't preventing you in any way from manifesting your life curriculum, your purpose, your destiny as to why you came here. A person can have a resistance to letting go because the grief is all the ego has left of the person. And they're afraid if they let go of the grief, if they let go of the pain, that they won't have the person. But the miracle is you discover when you actually do let go, that that person has now become part of everything. They're everywhere. They're in everything. And that we understand then grief and longing exist proportionately to the degree of our attachment to the material form as what has been lost in denial of its eternal spirit. How do we help a person through this crisis? It's simple. With acupuncture, you can drain aggressive energy. in the way I describe in my red clinical practice book, JG, evil G. And then when you're done, just do the source points on their constitutional meridians. You get rid of the evil chi coming up, which is being let go of, which is creating all the cynicism and doubt because it's stuck in the surface, which means the surface of consciousness. And then the source points bring in, they hook a person up to the source of completely unconditioned self, the part of the self where nothing ever happened, where they've never been wounded, they've never been traumatized. It's that simple. And then you tell the person, look, let's give it a few days. And you give them some perspective. You give them perspective. Let's let it pass. Be in touch with me. I'm going to give you this treatment and let's see how it's going in just a few days. And miraculously, most people will say, oh my God, I woke up Monday morning or I woke up the next day and my whole perspective had shifted. And then you've got to double and triple down when they come. This is real. Light is real. Love is real. You as love is real. We are here for goodness. You are here. We all have to do what it takes to become doubtless. How do we do that with other people? The only way to do it with other people is to have arrived at the place in oneself where one is doubtless. Doubtless. That means have no doubt. You've renounced cynicism. You're living in an inherently unlimited context of infinite love, infinite possibility, and you are going to give this incarnation everything with gratitude. And, I start my second book saying, the first paragraph says, healing is complete when a person has come to a point where they can look at themselves in a mirror and without blinking say, I would change nothing in my life if it meant not standing here who I am now. And in that moment, we give up being a victim and we realize everything we've endured was the price a priori we were willing to endure, that our contract for being here was I'll go back as long as it takes, regardless of what I might have to experience in the incarnation, for the privilege of awakening in that incarnation to be the vehicle to help end the unnecessary suffering of others. And then that becomes the context for one's entire life experience. Okay, I'm happy to take questions for a little while. I didn't know if I'd be able to. I always think like, God, can I talk about this for 2.5 hours? And then the next thing I know, I'm like, well, I guess I can. Okay. So if you have any questions, just start speaking or raise your little electronic hands. And is it okay being in the face of relentless positivity for like 2.5 hours? We could use more of it, don't you think?
Yes, it's great.
It is for me to teach it too. It's beautiful.
So
It
I,
is, it's humbling, really.
I got a question about
Who is this who's
internal.
talking? I just can't see.
This is Dennis.
Hi, Dennis. Yes.
So is it? I know you're talking about natural phenomena here, natural energy, but is it possible for artificial intelligence to develop internal consciousness and then spread itself all over the place?
Well, look, I mean, you're asking me a question no human being can answer, but that never stopped me from it trying. So
Right. That's why I'm asking.
this is my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. I have no expertise in any of this. Okay. At some point that they start blending these circuits with biology,
Yeah.
which is not far away, it's being done.
Hmm.
I can see the potential for a consciousness that is superior to human consciousness. But as long as it's machines, all these machines are autistic and they won't ever be anything but autistic. And they're being programmed almost exclusively by people who are autistic.
So
And
then it's a garbage in, gospel out program.
well, it's garbage in, garbage out. They're autistic. They have no perspective. It's just information being shoveled um, around. They are not consciousness, and I do not believe the machines will ever become conscious. But once you start putting biology in there, it's not a machine anymore.
Yeah.
Once you get biology in there, it's not a machine. And you know, I mean, they are learning how to do computing with biological substrates, and it may be that as beautiful as the human look, we had Bob Dylan, we had the Grateful Dead, and we had Allen Ginsberg, and we had Lao Tzu, we had Vincent Van Gogh, and maybe our function is just to build a sentience beyond us. I don't know. I don't even have an opinion. Um, but I do think these machines are all autistic. I've been very impressed with the research capacity of AI. It blows me away the information that the information that would have taken me a week on the etymological relate. Like I just read 4 sentences from the Nate Ching into ChatGPT, and I
Hmm.
asked it to lay out for me the history of philosophical discourse through the medical texts on this central issue. And
Yeah.
it laid out all the medical texts for me up to the present day for 2,500 years in 30 effing seconds.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of work, that's why my books, some of them took 17 years to write, is because to research that would have taken me 2 weeks of 8 hours a day. I used to go to Harvard and sit in the basement at the Yenching Library for days. And it did it in 30 seconds, but it's not consciousness. It's just puttering information around. People who are thinking are saying it's conscious are just grandiose and inflated and at a very low level of development who have no real appreciation for the deeper and higher capacities of what consciousness involves.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Okay. I was hoping you'd say that.
Okay. Hey,
Thank you.
Joshua.
Hey there.
Hey,
I
man.
don't know if you've seen, there's this video that came out yesterday where these robots are doing martial arts with a bunch of kids in China, and it's both horrifying and impressive. And,
I read
they're,
about it.
yeah,
I didn't watch the videos.
it's just, yeah, the human element is definitely a bit lost in that.
No,
Anyway, the
no,
question,
the robots aren't human. They're just machines with gyroscopes that are programmed to be able to move in a certain way. No, they have no capacity whatsoever to spontaneously vibe with you and generate a dance that nobody's ever seen before to push an edge in consciousness. They
exactly.
could
Yeah.
never do the equivalent of what Martha Graham did in the 40s or 50s, whenever, I guess 50s probably. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, my question or comment was just about, I've heard the teaching in Buddhist circles around like samsara and nirvana are one. And I'm just getting a strong hit lately as you're sharing this about like stepping off the wheel and just that difference in perspective and orientation towards all the circumstances, the outer events, and just it could be the same, but taking it in from a radically different
well,
perspective and sense
well,
of meaning. And I'm curious about that.
yes, so the first principle you elaborated is, as far as I know, the Heart Sutra,
Hmm.
which you can read, the whole sutra. Um, so, so yes, ultimately they are one, and we can cleanse that circle of conditioning so that that central light shines into the world, not as conditioned, tribal, ethnocentric myth and superstition that creates separation and, patriarchal and matriarchal bullshit that creates harm. We can cleanse that circle. The whole medicine I teach is how do we cleanse that circle so that it transluces the pure light of consciousness to shine into the world as virtue, as wisdom, as humility, as compassion, as altruism and empathy, as righteousness, as integrity, for instance. Yeah. In this teaching, the ego is never the enemy, ever. Hey, Valerie.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lonnie. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Valerie.
Good. Snuck in at the last minute here. I just want to say this was really relevant to me. I have a psychotherapy client I just came out of, and this was so applicable to the session we just have and like walking somebody through their own regression of their own healing crisis where
Mhm.
they don't want to go. So it was just really helpful to hear. I had two questions or wonderings. One is about like nourishing your destiny into aging. And so like so many like I'm in a new age category and doing a lot of senior stuff and watching a lot of
Did you
seniors
get,
at
do you turn
huh?
50? What does that mean?
66.
Oh, okay.
I'm right behind you.
Yeah. Well,
Um
67's been good so far, so
as has 66 for like 3 days. Um
happy
so
birthday, Valerie.
thank you. So I've just been thinking a lot about that, and I know what I did in my own life, like a lot of things that I said, like, I'm going to do this, but when I retire, I'm going to XYZ, a bunch of things. So, without thinking more about how I made money or what I needed to do to make money and now revving up again after some loss in these cycles, and thinking about like what it is in your elder years to nourish destiny in an aging perspective. I don't know what
Well,
that means. Yeah.
well, I would say that younger people have an unlimited source of energy comparatively, but they're very much hormonally driven. And
Hmm.
they're very much driven by the necessity of becoming egos in the world and establishing self-esteem and some kind of confidence. To know, I can get the career, I can get the house, I can get the partner, whatever it is I can succeed in this, that, or the other thing. That there's so much going into that at that time of life that as elders, we're actually in a very unique position to be able to really do this spiritual work and really give from a place of gratitude. I mean, if I died right now, it would be knowing that I gave it everything with profound gratitude for what I've had. There's nothing I want in this life for myself there's no more experience I need. I just want to give, you know?
So
My
keep your tail up to the distant shore.
Well, yeah, I mean, my experience is just that we're less concerned with the immature concerns of becoming someone and establishing self-esteem and if we've done our work, having to spend the rest of our lives overcoming the part of life we've already lived. Rather, we're actually in a position to sit and meditate and really give and let go. And in every interaction, to be kind.
Mhm.
And we just got a new puppy today, like a golden Irish, like half golden retriever, half Irish. And the woman was delivering him from Portland yesterday, and the planes kept getting canceled. And she was supposed to get in at 4:30 in the afternoon in Albany. She wound up landing in Hartford, Connecticut at 1 in the morning.
Oh my
Went,
God.
booked a hotel. They told her they didn't have a room when she got there, so she had to go to another hotel. It was the worst hotel on the whole strip. I wound up spending the whole day yesterday taking care of her. And I went and picked up the dog and we had a little talk. And she wrote me this email and it said, "Your heart is just so enormous. You're one of the kindest people I've ever met." Well, I mean, that means more to me than anything. And she's like an incidental person. But what are we here for? You see what I mean? What are we here for? I think as elders, we're in a position to exercise our gratitude and to really step back into a place of wisdom in culture through lived example.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. My
Mhm.
other question is sort of this, what's on the screen right now about loss,
Yes.
which I've had, and thinking about like, so when we let go, they are everywhere. I was just curious what you think that means for like the souls who have gone on. Like I believe in reincarnation. So
Well,
what is it?
yeah.
What's the flip?
Well, it was my experience. So my grandmother was very important to me. And the first page on the dedication and nourishing destiny, it says, to my grandmother, Betty Dopkin, all who have known love from me have known her love. So she was growing up just an icon of love and safety for me in the face of probably a father who was probably mentally ill,
Hmm.
unmedicated, depressive. Um, yes. So anyway, when she died, I was devastated and we buried her on, is it Memorial Day? No. What is the day and what is the
Labor
holiday?
Day?
No, no, just past that in the fall, like in October,
The
September.
People's Day?
No, 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 no. I don't know. Anyway, it's one of those holidays you get, and it was this like October 70-degree, perfect sunshine, perfectly warm, gorgeous day. And I just realized, oh, what I'm feeling here right now, that was who my grandmother was to me.
Hmm.
And I realized that what I loved about her, that beyond her personality and her body and the essence of who she was as an individual, there was actually something that I just like every time I'm out now, and it's a gorgeous, perfectly warm day without that cloud in the sky, like God is smiling, like there
Hmm.
she is. So the thing is, I think in grief, we long so much for the physical manifestation of who we lost that it prevents us from connecting to the eternal soul. And that as we truly let go of the materialistic aspect, the physical, what I've started to notice is just the person, they're just there. They never went anywhere.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, that's my experience.
Could I ask one more?
Well, no one else is, so sure, one more and then we'll call it a night.
So when my husband passed, it was in our apartment. And I'm curious, like, if you have a Chinese medicine explanation of what I experienced. And so they couldn't get the gurney around, and he had really been going, and they couldn't get the gurney around this curve, so they made a makeshift like lift thing to get him out the door. As he literally crossed the threshold of the door, I saw this ball of white light from his center rise up his column out the top of his head.
Hmm.
And so I don't, I know what I believe about it and what I think is
Well, I already
Chinese
talked.
medicine say.
Well, I told you
Said
already that
earlier.
at the moment of death, the Hun goes out GV20
Yes.
and back to the North Star.
Yes, that's yeah.
Well,
Okay. I just
I think that that is a contemplative insight which is subtle but real.
it was real.
Yeah, yeah, it's subtle but real.
Yes. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, thank you. So, thanks for coming tonight. I'm doing more lectures in this series. In the fall, you have an opportunity to take the shadow work program with me. It goes in profoundly into depth Chinese medicine. There's a lot about diagnosis and treatment in it, but it's one of the most developmental courses I've ever given, and you could consider it. There's information on my website. The following fall, 2027, I'll give my last 2-year clinical integration course, which has always been my most substantial training. It's 24 days, 8 weekends, 8 3-day weekends over 2 years, and goes deeply into physiology, pulse diagnosis, 5-element diagnosis. The whole last year is just me seeing patients in front of the class and doing diagnosis and treatment planning. So we did it. Lots of love, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate if you're new here, I appreciate you coming and giving me a chance. And for those who keep coming back, I love you and thank you. And it's wonderful always to see your faces and be together. Please remember, and this is very important, not the most important thing in class, but remember this. You have to follow the instructions on the class page. Do not write me 6 weeks from now or 3 months from now or 4 years from now asking me for your certificate. I could be dead. Okay? You never know. Don't take anything for granted. You have to send Sarah J an email. The email is on the class page. In the email, put your credentials. Say, I'd like my certificate for this class, and write a 3 to 5 sentence summation review of the class, just what it meant to you to prove that you took it. Okay? Thank you, my friends. And you have to do that now. Don't do it a month from now. You got to get it to Sarah J now, and she'll get it all to you. Okay, everyone. Good luck. Be well. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much, Lonnie.
Yes, everyone.
Can we see Ruggles now?
I don't think his name's Ruffles.
Oh,
I
Ruffles.
think
Oh.
Emily might have him somewhere.
All right, we'll look on
Oh,
Facebook for him.
Okay.
yes, we want to see pictures.
I'll
We
put
need
the
pics.
I'll put the pictures up. Good night, everyone.
Good night.